Let's talk about something real for a moment. For a lot of professionals, Sunday night carries a certain type of feeling. You start thinking about Monday morning, those meetings you have, the stakeholders you're dealing with, the pressure that's waiting for you. You're thankful, though, for the opportunity you have. You worked hard to get into this field. You're hoping this opportunity becomes a real career in this thing that I love, that I hope you fall in love with, called project management. But at the same time, I get it. You're human. See, moments where you start asking yourself questions like, why does this feel harder than I expected? Or why do I feel like I am still trying to prove myself? Therefore, the real reason must be that professionals eventually learn this is that quiet competence carries far more power than loud opinions. And when you start observing meetings through that particular lens, you begin noticing something very interesting. Most meetings aren't struggling because people aren't speaking. Most meetings are struggling because everyone is speaking, but no one is providing directions, which leads me to my very first principle I want to share with you today. Principle number one, the room does not need another opinion. It needs direction. Ooh, this is going to be a good episode, family. I'm excited. I hope you are. See, you've been in a meeting before where it starts with a straightforward agenda, one project, one set of decisions that actually needs to be made. Then opinions start. Someone starts talking about the timeline is unrealistic. Someone else believes that the requirements haven't really been fully defined. A third person starts raising risks that haven't even materialized yet, but now they're on the table and the room is reacting to them anyway. Within 15 minutes, the conversation is moving in 5 different directions. Everyone is engaged. The energy is high and everyone is absolutely confused because nothing is getting decided. The meeting that was supposed to move the project forward has officially become the project's biggest obstacle. That's exactly when leadership becomes visible, not before the chaos, not after it's resolved. There. Let me unpack this for you, family. Most professionals think that their job is to add perspective to a discussion. And in that moment, with everyone else doing exactly the same thing, this instinct is costing the team more than anyone realizes. And family, I've been there and I've done this. I've lived it. This is why I love sharing this with you, because I've also experienced that. See, the room doesn't have a shortage of perspective. Everyone has a recommendation. It has a shortage of direction. See, the leader in that moment isn't the person with the strongest opinion. It's the person with the clearest mind who can step back from the noise and say, here's actually what's happening and where we need to go. Why is this important? When you constantly add opinions without direction, you train the room to see you as a contributor, not a leader. But the moment you shift to organizing the conversation and pointing towards the next step, the room, it begins to revolve around you. See, that's how leadership present begins forming before a title ever arrives. Experiment with these actionable tips. Become the person who organizes the conversation. I know it's going to be difficult. I'm still struggle with this to this day because you have to resist from adding your own opinion. Instead, you need to understand everyone else's. Say, before we go any further, let me make sure I understand what is actually being discussed. Then name those 2 to 3 core points, creating the friction. You're no longer participating in a debate. You're the person organizing. Next one. End the summary with a direction, not a question. Don't hand the decision back to the room. Follow the summary with one clear next step. You could say something like this. Based on everything that we just discussed, here's what I think needs to happen first. Here's my professional insight, family. The person who earns the deepest trust is almost never the one who talked the most in the difficult meeting. It's the one who made the difficult meeting productive. Ooh, I like that, family. See, this is the individual who helped the team see clearly when things were complicated and gave people a path forward when the conversation, was idle or it was stuck. See, over time, the pattern becomes a reputation, and that reputation becomes a reason people look forward or is excited to work with you. And I get it. The professionals who talk the most, the ones with the opinion on everything, That's not always the most confident people in the room. Sometimes the opposite is true, which leads us to the next principle. Loud opinions often mask internal insecurities. Ooh. Principle number 2, loud opinions often mask internal insecurities. So think about a meeting you've been in recently. There's always been that one person who has something to say about everything. Every idea gets challenged. Every suggestion questioned. Every discussion turns into a debate. At one point, the energy in the room starts to kind of shift. I mean, people stop engaging. You'll see people's eyes, they just drop to the table. The conversation is no longer about solving problems. It's about surviving the room. Most professionals assume that kind of behavior, well, that signals confidence. Disagree. See, but in many situations, it's signaling something else entirely. Here's what I want to unpack for you, family. True confidence doesn't need an audience. Confident professionals don't need to dominate every conversation because they already know their value. They don't need the room to confirm what they already know. But when someone feels uncertain about their position, their competency, or whether they truly belong, they kind of overcompensate. They talk more. They challenge everything, not because they're strong, but because the noise is the only tool they have to hide the doubt. Quiet confidence doesn't perform for the room. You know what it does? It does read the room. You know what it does? It speaks when the moment is genuinely required for direction, not validation. I like that, family. Why is it important? Understanding the pattern changes how you read every room you walk into. When you see someone performing loudly, you stop feeling threatened. You start seeing clearly. And when you resist the urge to match that energy, you immediately separate yourself from the noise, which is exactly where leadership credibility is built. Experiment with these actionable tips. Observe before you engage. I want you to ask yourself, is this conversation moving us toward a solution or towards dominance? See, if it's towards dominance, there's no point of us playing this game. I'm not going to allow you to play in my face. So the person who understands the room will always have more power than the person who is trying to control it. I want you to sit and think with that for a moment. Next one, let your silence do the work first. Next time someone is performing loudly, stay quiet. Hold your posture. Stay present. Then, when the moment is right, when the offer is clear, yeah, I'm laughing, because this is when we get direct observation. That single moment will do more for you in a leadership reputation than 10 defensive rebuttals ever could. Here's my professional insight. The professionals who earn the deepest respect are rarely the loudest ones. They're the ones who demonstrate something far more rare: discipline under pressure. They listen when it would be easier to argue. They pause when the instinct is, to react. And then they finally speak. The room, it gets quiet because people have learned that when they speak, it matters. It's not personality. This is a skill you can develop deliberately. You don't have to win every argument in the room to earn influence in the room. Some of the most respected leaders have mastered something most professionals never learn. They know exactly when not to argue, which brings us to the next principle. You don't have to win every debate to win the long game. Principle number 3, you don't have to win every debate to win the long game. I like this. See, a requirement changes. 2 people disagree. A stakeholder pushes back. One thing happens where the conversation has already derailed. Nobody is solving the problem anymore. Everyone is defending or holding their position. And early in your career, you'll feel that pressure. If you don't push back right away, they will think, I don't know what I'm doing. So you argue harder, you hold your ground longer. But here's what they don't tell you early enough. And I wish I learned this much earlier than I did, is the room forgets who won the argument. I will say that again. The room forgets who won the argument. What is remembered, though, is who moved the work forward. Winning debates and building credibility are not the same thing. The more you fight to win every argument, the more political capital you quietly spend, often without even realizing it. When a conversation turns into a battle, people stop listening to understand. They start listening to defend. The best idea in the room no longer gets its value or basically wins, but the loudest one does. Strong leaders understand that influence doesn't live in the moment. It lives in patterns. They're not playing the conversation game. They're playing the relationship, the project, and the long-term outcome game. Why is this important? Every time you speak for the sake of winning, you spend your credibility you've already built. But when you consistently redirect toward outcomes and let your outcomes speak, you build something more valuable than debate victories. You build a reputation for judgment, and judgment is what gets you trusted with high stakes decisions. Experiment with these actionable tips. Redirect toward the outcome, not the argument. Ooh. Pause. Then say, before we go further, what outcome are we actually trying to reach here? See that single question? It shifts the role from competing to collaborating. And this positions you as a person with the clearest head. Next one. Let results make your argument for you. Sometimes the most strategic play is letting the team move forward and staying focused on executing well regardless. When the results come in, they tell a different story without you having to say a word. Over time, that pattern becomes your reputation, and your reputation becomes your leverage. Here's my professional insight, family. At some point, the most respected leaders stop needing to fight for their ideals, not because their ideals got worse, but because their judgment became undeniable. When people consistently see that your input leads to better outcomes, they stop waiting for you to defend your position. They start asking for your perspective before the debate even starts. Ooh, I like that, family. That's what we call the long game in real time. The leaders who play the long game listen differently than everyone else. Most professionals listen for their turn to speak. Strong leaders listen to understand what is actually happening beneath the surface, which brings us to the next principle. Principle number 4, listen to lead, not to respond. Family, I don't know if you already made it to principle 4, but this is getting good to me because you have to understand. See, a colleague is explaining a serious challenge the team is facing. They haven't even finished the sentence, but the room is already gone. One person is already mentally drafting their defense. Another is calculating the timeline impact. Someone else is just waiting for the first pause to jump in. And then the person speaking, they can feel it. How can they feel it? Slight hesitation. How can they feel it? Their voice starts to trail off the moment they decided to say less than they planned, because the room made it clear that being heard wasn't really part of the agenda. Everyone is technically present, but no one is actually there. Let me unpack this for you. Most professionals listen to respond, not to disengage, but working hard to process, prepare, and position. It just happens to be entirely about themselves. Listening requires getting out your head long enough to fully enter someone else's. When you stay present past the point most people check out, you start noticing things you normally wouldn't catch. See, the real concern underneath the stated concern, the confusion nobody has really named yet, the moment conversations stop being about the problem, that awareness separates leaders who react from leaders, oh, I like this, family, to who guides. Why is this important? When people feel genuinely heard, they become more open, more collaborative, and more willing to follow your lead. Listening fully is not a soft skill. It is a leadership multiplier. The leaders who have gained the most trust in high-stake environments are rarely the ones with the most to say. They're the ones who make others feel understood. They're the ones that create a feeling of loyalty that a title cannot manufacture. Experiment with these actionable tips. Stay present past the point of discomfort. The urge to respond is the most important moment in the conversation. Don't act on it. Let them finish completely. Not just their sentence, but their thought, the thing underneath that, what they're really trying to say. That's where the real information lies. Next one. Ask one clarifying question before you offer anything. Here's an example. What's the part of this that concerns you the most? See that thinking right there? It deepens your understanding. It signals you're focused on the problem, not your position. And it gives the other person something rare, an experience to finally be heard. Here's my professional advice. When you develop the discipline to listen carefully, people stop guarding themselves around you. They actually start bringing you real problems, not polished, no political safe version, actual thing that is actually going to move the organization or this project forward. And that's when your leadership becomes genuinely valuable because you can't solve the real problem if you only hear the surface version of it. See, most conversations don't suffer from a lack of opinion. They suffer from a lack of clarity. And what the room really needs in those moments, it's not more volume of someone talking. It's one person with the discipline to cut through the noise, which leads me to the next principle. Principle number 5, clarity carries more authority than volume. Oh my goodness, this is good. See, it starts with a focus, one agenda item, one problem to solve. Then there's layers appear, operation raises a resource concern. Client facing pushes on the timeline. Finances flag because they feel it's a budget risk nobody accounted for. Suddenly, everyone is talking loudly, urgently, all over the place. Volume keeps rising, clarity keeps dropping, a quiet panic sets in. Not because the problems are unsolved, but because no one can see through the noise long enough to figure out where to actually start. And everyone is waiting for the same thing, someone to make sense of it all. Let me unpack this for you, fam. Most professionals think authority comes from speaking the most, the loudest, the most aggressive, but real authority, the kind people actually want to follow and need to follow, doesn't come from volume. It comes from clarity. The person who can cut through the confusion, say, here's what's actually going on, and here's what we're going to do next. This person immediately becomes the most important person in the room, not because of their title, but because they gave everyone else something they desperately needed, a way through. Clarity removes uncertainty. And when uncertainty disappears, trust moves toward the person who removed it. Why is this important? Confusion is the norm in most professional environments, not the expectation. Projects are complex. Stakeholders misalign, priorities compete. The leader who consistently can cut through that confusion and give the team a clear path forward, they become indispensable. Not because they're the smartest person in the room, but because they're the most useful one when clarity is needed the most. Experiment with these actionable tips. Become the person who names what's happened. What do you mean by that? Resisting to add your own concern to the pile. I'll give you an example. Let me pause here for a second. Here's what I'm hearing. Then you name 2 to 3 core issues. That single move resets the entire room. Next one, give the room one clear next step. Clarity without direction is just analysis. Follow your summary immediately with one specific forward move, not a list of options, not a question to the group, not just one clear step. I'll give you an example. Based on everything we discussed, here's what I think needs to happen first. Here's my professional insight, family. The most influential person in the room is rarely the one who has all the opinions. It's the one that's most organized with their thinking. When confusion is high, pressure is building, that person becomes the gravitational pull. See, people orientate towards them, not because they demand attention, but because they offer something more valuable. Really. The relief of knowing that someone understands the situation clearly enough to lead us through it. Because clarity doesn't always require words. Sometimes the most clarifying thing a leader could do isn't to speak, it's to stop, to create a space where there was only noise, because silence used with intention can communicate more than a full minute of talking ever could. Which brings us to the next principle. Principle number 6, silence can create more impact than constant talking. A senior leader asks a pointed question. Why are we behind, and what's the plan to recover? You know how the room goes. It gets quiet. It gets still. And then almost immediately someone starts talking, not because they have the answer, but because the silence, it made them feel a little, you see my arm, uncomfortable. See, words fill air. Explanation, partial thoughts, sentences that trail off and circle back. And here's what everyone in the room is probably thinking, including the person speaking. This isn't landing. Meanwhile, one person hasn't said a word. And when they finally speak, 10, maybe 15 seconds later, the entire room just shifts. What they say is clear, specific, it's grounded. Not because they're smart, but because they gave themselves the space to actually formulate a thought. Let me unpack that for you, family. The instinct to feel silence doesn't signal engagement. It kind of signals anxiety. So rooms full of experienced professional can feel the difference between someone speaking with intention and someone speaking to manage their own discomfort. Ooh, I like that, family. Silence used with discipline communicates something completely different. It says, I don't need to rush. I don't need to perform. I am confident enough to take the time to ensure I get this right. That pause, those few seconds between the question and the response is one of the most underrated or underused leadership tools available to you. Why is this important? Every time you rush to fill silence, you signal you're reacting rather than thinking. But every time you hold your composure, respond from a place of calm, you signal something the room can feel and trust. Over time, people begin to associate your stillness with reliability. Your pause becomes a signal that what comes next is definitely worth hearing. Experiment with these actual tips. Let the question land before you respond. Don't speak for 3 to 5 seconds after a difficult question. Breathe. Exhale. Let it fully set in. See, what the room experiences in those seconds is not uncertainty, it's composure. And composure is one of the rarest things in a high-pressure professional environment. Next one. Use silence after you made your most important point. After a significant recommendation, stop talking. Be quiet. Don't soften it. Don't qualify it. Just let it sit. Let it marinate. See, that pause gives the room time to absorb what you said and creates weight around your words that no amount of volume can manufacture. Here's my professional advice, family. Most commanding presence in any room is rarely the person generating most noise. It's the person who seems completely unbothered by the noise, who isn't feeling silence out of anxiety, who moves their own pace because they're not performing for the room. They are actually doing something what we came to do, which is lead the project. That kind of presence doesn't announce itself, but everyone else, they have no choice but to feel it. See, some professionals hear this and misread it. They think quiet confidence means making yourself smaller or avoiding those uncomfortable conversations. That's not it. See, silence is a tool, not a hiding place, which leads us to our next principle. Principle number 7, don't shrink to make others feel comfortable. Oh, this is getting good, family. You've prepared. You've understood the data. You believe in the direction. Then you share your idea and someone pushes back. Before you even got a chance to finish the sentence, maybe they question your logic. Maybe they just have a tone that fills the room with enough force that everyone is looking at you to see how you will respond. And something happens you didn't plan for. You start pulling back. Well, it could work. Well, this is just one option. I'm not completely sure if this is the right call. And just like that, the ideal goes from being a potential success to defeated. You've defeated it yourself. This is one of the most common and most damaging patterns in a professional development. Let me unpack this for you, family. Shrinking feels like humility, but it isn't. See, humility is remaining open to others' perspectives while still standing behind yours. Shrinking is abandoning your perspective the moment it meets resistance, not because you were proven wrong, but because the room got uncomfortable. When you consistently soften under pressure, you train the room to apply, guess what? More pressure. Every time you back down, you confirm that the pushback works, not because you were thinking it was flawed, but because your confidence had a ceiling. True confidence, though, requires being the most consistent in the room. It requires for you to take a position and only shift when you have new information, not new energy. That consistency is what the room is actually watching for. Why is this important? Visibility is uncomfortable, family, but invisibility is costly. Every time you shrink to make someone else comfortable, you reduce your leadership footprint and signal that your perspective is always up for negotiation under pressure. The professionals earn lasting influence, learn to stay visible even when it felt risky. I'm not being aggressive. I'm not being defensive, but I am being present. I am grounded, and I'm unwilling to disappear because you feel uncomfortable. Experiment with these actionable tips. Audit the language you use when challenged. Notice when phrases like, I'm not sure if this makes sense, especially when you said none of that when you were preparing alone. See, ideal, it didn't get weaker. Your confidence in it did. I recommend that you replace it with this. Based on what we know, this is the direction I am recommending. Next one. Learn the difference between a challenge and a correction. I want you to ask yourself, are they offering me new information or a different opinion delivered with more force? See, if it's new information, I want you to engage openly. If it's just pressure, hold your ground calmly and professionally. I hear the concern. I still think this is the right direction, and here's why. That one sentence I just said to you builds more credibility than winning 10 debates ever could. Again, I hear the concern. I still think this is the right direction, and here's why. Here's my professional insight, family. At some point, the most respected leaders made a decision. They decided their perspective was worth defending, not because they're arrogant, but because they finally understood that constantly making themselves smaller wasn't protecting the room from discomfort. It was protecting them from visibility. And visibility, the willingness to be seen, challenged, and still stand behind your thinking is exactly where leadership present begins. And when you consistently show up that way, people stop forming opinions based on your title. They start forming opinions based on how you behave when it's hard. Because leadership, identity doesn't come from what's written next to your name on some org chart, which leads us to our next principle. Principle number 8, leadership identity forms through behavior, not titles. Oh, this is good, fam. See, I want you to think about it from the last time that your team went through a genuine, difficult moment. Like your project was behind, stakeholder relationship was fractured, a decision that needed to be made with incomplete information and real consequences attached. I want you to think about this. Who did the room turn to? Chances are not automatically the person with the highest title. It was the person who already proven through hundreds of small moments that they could be trusted when things got hard. They were chosen because of their pattern, and that pattern started forming long before anyone else gave them a title to match what they brought to the table. Let me unpack this for you, family. By the time a promotion is officially announced, the decision has usually already been made, whether informally, collectively, often, maybe weeks, months earlier, because the person around you have been watching. They notice how you responded the first time a project hit a serious obstacle, whether you brought calm or you added to the noise, whether you're focused on solutions or you got stuck on the problem. See, those observations accumulate quietly, meeting by meeting, decision by decision, until a reputation is formed. Not the reputation you design, the one you earn. Because leadership isn't never assigned, it's observed and decided by the people around you based entirely on how you behave when it actually matters. Why is this important? You don't have to wait for a promotion to start building leadership identity. The behaviors you demonstrate today, how you handle pressure, how you communicate it in difficult conversation, how you show up to the next stakeholder meeting, how will you get where I'm going with this? You're already building a reputation. The most strategic thing you could do right now to close the gap between how you currently show up and how you want to be perceived. Experiment with these actionable tips. Start leading at the level you want before you have permission. Before your next meeting, ask, if I already have the role I'm working toward, how would I show up right now? See, then you show up that way. This is not a performance. I'm on my AI stuff. Practice, baby. This is about practice. See, the behaviors you repeat become the identity you build, and the identity you build determines the opportunity you attract. Next one. Treat high pressure moments as your most visible leadership audition. The room remembers who stayed grounded when timelines collapse, who communicated honestly when the news was bad. When the next difficult moment arrives, and it will, I want you to treat it as the most important leadership opportunity you've had all year. all quarter. Because for you, I want to let you know people are watching. Here's my professional insight, family. Almost none of the most respected leaders can point to a single moment when their leadership was established. What they can describe is a pattern, a series of ordinary moments where they made a decision to stay calm instead of react, to bring clarity instead of adding noise. And those decisions accumulated into something undeniable. That title eventually came, but that leadership had already arrived, not because someone gave it to them, because they built it quietly, consistently, and one behavior at a time. When you step back and you look at everything that we discussed here today, quiet confidence is not a personality type. It's a set of deliberate decisions made consistently, often in moments that feel small, but they accumulate into something the room cannot ignore, which brings us to the truth. Here's the truth, family. Quiet confidence becomes powerful when supported by consistent results. Leadership influence is not built through loud opinions. It was never that way. It's built through how you listen when the room is competing to be heard, how you bring clarity when the conversation starts shifting, how you hold your composure when the pressure pulls up to your front door and rings the doorbell or knocks on your door. See, those are not dramatic moments. Most of them won't make it into the highlight reel, but the people around you are watching every single one. And over time, those observations accumulate into something no title can manufacture, an actual reputation. That kind that can walk into any room before you do. Your work starts speaking for itself. Your judgment starts earning trust before you even said a word. And when the room needs direction, guess who they look towards? You, not because you were the loudest, but because you were the most prepared. You were the most composed. You were the most consistent. You was the individual that made a decision, not a choice, to be a leader. Here's the Monday challenge. Walk in calm. Walk in prepared. Walk in certain of the value you bring. When you speak, make it count, not by feeling silenced, but by breaking it with something worth hearing. Not by winning the debate, but redirecting it towards what actually matters. Well, family, if this resonated with you, don't rush past it. Choose one principle. Practice it intentionally this week. And if you know a project manager who is questioning themselves right now, send this episode their way. For those that are ready to build confidence, judgment, and leadership depth over time, you'll find my mentorship and coaching link in today's episode. And if you're new to the episode, I go by the name of ED. For all you smart and intelligent folks out there, that just simply means Ed. Until next time.